Hey everybody, I was at Vancouver Film Festival last month, and one of the last films I saw there was Ladybird, and it was pretty good. This is the directorial debut of Greta Gerwig from Frances Ha. Now, she actually also wrote Frances Ha with Noah Baumbach, and from what I can tell from her performances, she does seem like a naturally funny person. With her having complete creative control in this film, I'm pleased to say that the humor does work very well. Much of the film was genuinely funny, and the majority of performances brought that together really well. Saoirse Ronan was great, Laurie Metcalf was great, Lucas Hedges was just fine. He has no issues in the range of awkward and quiet, so he was actually pretty fitting for the role. It was only at the point in the film where his character was actually required to show any real emotion that he kind of started to suck. That didn't last all too long though, so I can't really complain much. This film was an enjoyable watch that is sure to please many people, but if you're looking for any kind of interesting directing, this is not where you're gonna find it. Much of the film was very boringly and repetitively framed. A few of the shots had some really obvious and preventable lighting issues. With the way this film was presented on a purely aesthetic level, this seems less like a film you would find in theaters and more like some random film you would find on Netflix that you've never even heard of. The only other thing I could say that was particularly off-putting about the film would be parts of the script. Overall, it was funny and well written and had a great sense of personality to it, but there's some parts that definitely felt a little obnoxiously cliched. So much so that I don't really consider what I'm about to say to be a spoiler at all, but I'll throw on the warning anyway. Click to this point in the video if you don't want to hear it. 3, 2, 1, there's your warning, and go. Now, it's not really the most important plotline of the film, but they seriously pulled the whole, hey, let me pretend to be somebody else so that the cool kids will like me trope, wherein the main character successfully becomes accepted by the cool kids, but then she has to pretend as though she's not really friends with her comedic best friend sidekick, and her comedic best friend sidekick is obviously hurt by this. Like, oh no, it looks like you're too cool for me now. I thought we were friends. But then later the main character finds out that the cool kids are actually assholes and she prefers not to be a cool kid, so she goes back to her best friend's sidekick and is like, I'll be friends with you again. And then everything's okay because they're best friends. It is seriously difficult to think of a plot line that would be more cliched than what I just described. The inclusion of this plot line in the film is just absolutely awful. Like I said, it's not really the focus of the film. The rest of the film's plot is much more digestible. I just feel like that whole annoyance easily could have been taken out. Anyway, I still would recommend this film, although not that ecstatically. It was good, it was enjoyable, but it does not achieve anything greater than that. And I'm giving this one a 6 out of 10. And lastly, to close off the festival, I saw the new Todd Haynes film Wonderstruck, and it was pretty fucking annoying. Now, I understand that a lot of people were excited for this film because of the people involved. Todd Haynes himself has directed some pretty critically acclaimed films. Edward Lockman as cinematographer and Carter Burwell composing the music. With all of these pieces combined, you should theoretically have an amazing film, right? Well, maybe for some, but it certainly was not the case for me or the 3 other people that I saw the film with. If we're going to individually judge the elements of directing, cinematography, and music composition, those were all great, but the story fucking sucked. The entire fucking film just had this obnoxiously overinflated sense of self-importance. The presentation was basically just shouting, look at how significant this is, but none of it was. It was just a bunch of unimportant, boring bullshit. Hey, wow, look, he's over here, but did you know that 50 years ago there was a little girl who was also over here and she was also deaf? Wow, that is so incredibly significant. Let's keep cutting back and forth between the 2 scenes. I mean, neither of these scenes would be very significant at all if we weren't cutting between 2 different scenes of basically the same thing 50 years apart, but because they're doing similar things 50 years apart from each other, it's all of a sudden significant now. Aren't you impressed? I know it's weird to say this, but because the score was so mystical and well composed, it actually made things a lot worse. Because the music as it was presented in the film was constantly giving off a sense of something greater than what was actually being shown. And you're left with a film that is literally insisting its own significance upon itself when there is none. What you're showing is just really not all that special. Please stop trying to aggressively insist that it is. The story was just so boring and unspecial that it was absolutely cringeworthy to watch the film continue to insist upon its own importance. If this musical score was used in a different film that actually had an important or significant plot, it would have worked great. But unfortunately, it's wasted on this pretentious turd. From what I can tell, the older scenes were shot using actual film, which was pretty cool. The movie looked pretty nice overall. The acting was alright, I guess, but I can't really say that I was all that wowed with the child performances, which were most of the performances performances. Oftentimes I couldn't tell if it was the fault of the actor or the way they were being directed. A lot of it just seemed very unnatural and unconvincing. There was a scene where the only characters in a room are two deaf people and one gives the other something to read. And they read it out loud as though they're projecting their voice for a theater performance. Like, this was definitely not just a, oh, I'm reading out loud to myself because that's what I do. It was just so painfully obvious that they were projecting their voice for an audience. But with both of you in the room being deaf, who the fuck was that for? Meanwhile, the film's score is just beating into our heads how emotional and important this whole scene is. Aw man, just listen to him delivering this closing monologue. We've learned so much. Also, this is not really a Julianne Moore film, because she is barely in the movie, despite appearing quite prominently in nearly all of the promotional material. So that was kinda lame, but not nearly as lame as the film's story and just how seriously they expect you to be taking it. It's a really lame movie. It's cheesy and dumb. It is an annoying experience, and one that I do not recommend. There are individual elements of this film that are unquestionably well done, but it really doesn't matter how much icing you throw on if the cake is made of shit. And I'm giving this one a 2 out of 10.